We are now nearly 4 months removed from the 2023 college football season. Time is starting to go by really quickly, as we're just a couple weeks away from this year's draft class, and everyone will be talking about next year's freshmen. I mean, they already are. There are some quarterbacks from the 2024 class that'll get a chance to play right away, but for now, I want to do a quick deep dive into the 2023 class. We're going to talk about all the big-time freshman quarterbacks, guys like Arch Manning, Nico from Tennessee, Dante Moore from UCLA, and Jackson Arnold from Oklahoma. All these guys were 5-star recruits, and there were plenty of other names who were a big deal early on. But how did they all end up doing? Well, today we're going to take a look at the top 10 freshman quarterbacks from the 2023 class and give them honest evaluations on their first year. Originally, the video was supposed to talk about all freshman quarterbacks, but I realized most of them didn't play, and I didn't exactly know where to draw the line in terms of how many guys to talk about. So I decided we're going to talk about the top 10, and also I will talk about 2 other players who were extremely under-recruited who got a chance to get on the field. But before we do all that and grade all these quarterbacks, if you're new to the channel and you love college football, be sure to subscribe to the channel, leave a like if you can support today's video, and let me know what player, team, topic, or situation I could cover next. Now let's get started, and let's grade those 2023 quarterbacks. Okay, so the first freshman quarterback we're going to talk about was not actually ranked inside the top 10. In fact, he was actually number 45 in the country, and his name was Anthony Colandrea. I'm not quite sure if you've heard that name before, but Colandrea was not a very big deal coming out of high school. In fact, no one really knew him. He went to Lakewood High School in St. Petersburg, Florida, and was listed as a 3-star recruit. He ended up committing to play for Virginia, and he really wasn't expected to play a whole lot at the beginning. Unfortunately for Virginia, their transfer Tony Muskett would end up getting hurt, and from there, Colandrea would have to come in. I believe he ended up starting 7 games, and he threw for a total of 2,000 yards with 13 touchdowns and 9 interceptions. His best game would come against Duke, where he threw for 278 yards and 3 touchdowns without an interception. He also led them to a win, and for me, I give this guy a grade of a B. The only reason I wouldn't give him an A is because he didn't win that many games, and he also had a ton of interception. While he had 13 scores, he did have 9 picks, and he's got to get rid of that. He definitely came out of nowhere, and I think he could be a lot better this year. The next guy on the list is also a player who wasn't super highly ranked. His name was Lenorris Sellers. It does depend on the recruiting database, but according to 24/7 Sports, he was the number 34 quarterback in the class of 2023. He was a late rising player out of South Carolina, which is why he would flip from Syracuse to the Gamecocks. Many people were raving about how much potential he had, and last year as the backup to Spencer Rattler, he had a couple incredible games. In a game against Furman, he went 4 for 4 with 2 touchdowns, one of which was insane, and then he also had a 36-yard touchdown run against Vanderbilt. Whenever Lenorris touched the ball last year, he was great, and everyone's been raving about how much potential he has. I'm also going to give him a grade of a B, as when he got the ball, he did everything he was supposed to and made magic happen, but he barely got it on the field, so I can't really give him an A. I'm really pumped for Lenorris Sellers in the future, and in his limited sample size, he did so well last year that he is the presumed quarterback over Robbie Ashford. Okay, now we enter into blue chip territory, and the first guy I want to talk about is Eli Holstein. Coming out of Zachary High School in Louisiana, he originally committed to Texas A&M, but eventually would take his 7,000 yards and 62 touchdowns to the University of Alabama. Holstein was part of a 5-man quarterback battle at Bama, but would ultimately decide to redshirt. In my opinion, he doesn't even get a grade because he didn't do anything and didn't have a chance, but now he'll be headed off to Pitt this upcoming fall. Pittsburgh will be looking to get a new starting quarterback, and Holstein should have a chance to really develop and be a good player over the next 3 years. The next guy we need to talk about is Lincoln Kienholz. Coming out of Pierce, South Dakota, Kienholz was a late riser in the class of 2023 and eventually flipped from Washington to Ohio State. He blew up into a big-time recruit and ultimately would finish as the number 11 quarterback in this year's class. Kienholz was not expected to do anything for Ohio State this year, as they already had Devin Brown and starter Kyle McCord. Ultimately though, Kienholz would get some action. After Brown got hurt against Mizzou in the Cotton Bowl, he would have to come in and play. Obviously, it's hard to grade the guy because he was not supposed to be in this position, but it was quite obvious he was not ready to be at this level. Against Mizzou, he ended up going 6 of 17 without a touchdown and without an interception. He really couldn't get anything going, but as I said, he was not ready for the moment. I guess based on his small sample size, I have to give him a D, but it's also not a super fair assessment just yet. At number 10, we have to talk about Christopher Vizzina. He was always a big deal, as coming out of Birmingham, Alabama, Kienholz passed for 5,000 total yards in his career at Briarwood Christian School. He ended up becoming a 4-star recruit and the number 10 quarterback in the class of 2023, and while there was a little bit of buzz to him last spring, everyone knew that Cade Klubnik was going to be the starter this fall. Vizzina would not end up getting a chance to play, and would ultimately redshirt in 2023. I honestly can't even give him a grade, but I am excited for his future with the Tigers. Up next, we have a guy who I'm extremely excited about for the future, and that is quarterback Avery Johnson. Coming out of Mays, Kansas, he would play alongside Colorado running back Dylan Edwards, and Johnson lit up his high school area. He became known for his insane plays and his long hair, and eventually decided to commit to Kansas State. He finished as the number 9 quarterback recruit in the class of 2023, and was expected to redshirt last year. He was stuck behind Will Howard, but when Howard struggled, Johnson got a chance. While he only started one game last year, Johnson had pretty great numbers. He threw for 479 yards and 5 touchdowns, and also ran for 300 yards and 7 touchdowns. Having 12 touchdowns and not even being a starting quarterback is pretty insane, and everyone's talking about that game against Texas Tech. On the road against the Red Raiders, Johnson ran for 5 rushing touchdowns and 100 yards, showing how much unbelievable potential he has. He reminds me of Colin Klein 2.0, and for me, Avery Johnson gets an A+. I think given all circumstances, Johnson was the best freshman quarterback last year, and I'm unbelievably excited for his future as he takes over as the starter this fall. At number 8, we have who in my opinion was the most unknown quarterback from this year's class, and that was Austin Mack. He ended up going to Folsom High School in California and had nearly 4,000 yards and 40 touchdowns as a junior. He decided to commit to Washington and then would skip his entire senior season. Obviously, Washington had Michael Penix Jr. at quarterback, so there was no reason for Mack to see the field. He decided to redshirt, and because of that, I can't really even give him a grade either. He does, though, have a lot of potential, as he is now transferred to Alabama to reunite with DeBoer, and I think will have a chance down the road to be a really special player. Another guy who was a well-kept secret was Aidan Chiles. He ended up finishing as the number 7 quarterback in the class of 2023, and was a top 60 player nationally. Coming out of Downey High School, Chiles was only 17 years old and was completely dominating. He decided to sign with Oregon State and would eventually fly up the recruiting ranking. This past season, he was the backup to DJ Uiagalelei, and after a special spring game, he ended up finishing this year with 309 yards and 4 touchdowns. Obviously, he saw limited action because of DJ, but he also had 3 more rushing scores on the ground. After everything that happened with Oregon State and Jonathan Smith, he decided to enter the transfer portal and became the number 2 transfer quarterback. He's now signed with Michigan State and is the presumed starter for this season. Based on his body of work, I give Chiles an A-, as he had 7 touchdowns in limited action and never turned the ball over once. At number 6, we have Jaden Rashada. A lot of people know him as one of the first big NIL quarterbacks, as he had big-time NIL offers for both Florida and Miami, but both of which would fall through, and he would sign where his dad went to school in Arizona State. He was somewhat controversial, but Rashada would get a chance to start right away for one of the youngest coaches in college football, Kenny Dillingham. Rashada would end up starting the first 3 games of the season, throwing for 485 yards with 4 touchdowns and 3 interceptions, before he would unfortunately go down with an injury. He'd end up missing the remainder of the season, and honestly, I give a C+ to Rashada. He did have a couple of moments as a starter, but overall he didn't look that great, did struggle with turnovers, and definitely needs more time to develop. Still though, he scored some touchdowns, won a game or 2, and did start. I've been hearing about this guy for years, and coming out of Los Alamitos High School in California, he was one of the most decorated players in a long time. As a senior, he ended up throwing for 3,000 yards with 35 touchdowns, and dominated pretty much his entire high school career. At one point, he was ranked the number 1 recruit in the nation, and was obviously the future of USC football. With Caleb Williams being the guy this year though, Malachi Nelson was not going to see the field. He ended up deciding the redshirt, but would complete 1 of 3 passes against San Jose State. Technically, it is really hard to give this guy a grade based on that, so I guess we're just going to throw B-. At least he completed a pass. I don't know. There's really not a point in grading Nelson, but we did. But what shocked everybody was when he decided to enter the transfer portal, and is now at Boise State. Did he not think he had a shot at winning the job? Or did he truly want to play for Boise State? I don't really know. Either way, USC will move forward with Miller Moss, and Nelson could have a chance to re-elevate the Boise program. It's one of the more intriguing transfers, and I'm going to do a video on it here at some point. Up next, we have one of the best Texas high school quarterbacks ever in Jackson Arnold. He ended up going to Denton Guyer, and he put on an absolute show. In 2 years, he threw for over 7,000 yards and 67 touchdowns, and chose Oklahoma over Alabama and Notre Dame. He's listed as a top 10 recruit and a 5-star, but with Dylan Gabriel as the starter, Arnold wasn't expected to play a whole lot. He ended up appearing in 6 total games, getting significant playing time against Arizona. In total, he finished with 4 touchdowns, 3 interceptions, and 1 rushing score. His biggest body of work would come against Arizona, and in that loss to the Wildcats, he'd throw for 361 yards with 2 touchdowns and 3 picks. While losing the game and throwing 3 picks is definitely pretty bad, he still had a lot of yards, had 2 scores, and looked pretty solid back there. We're going to average those 2 out, and I'm going to say he gets a C for his freshman year. As many of you guys know, I wasn't the biggest fan of Dillon Gabriel in the world, so now I'm really excited for the Jackson Arnold era, and I think he's definitely going to improve and skyrocket this fall. Man, the fact that we had 5 top 13 quarterbacks from the 2023 class is pretty insane, and at number 3 you had Dante Moore. Coming out of Martin Luther King High School in Detroit, Dante Moore was a huge deal, as for years he dominated and looked like a man amongst boys. After originally committing to Oregon though, Moore would flip his commitment to UCLA and would actually win the starting job as a true freshman. Moore though was a mixed bag. In total in 2023, he threw for 1,600 yards with 11 touchdowns and 9 picks. His best game would come in week 2 against San Diego State, as he threw for 290 yards with 3 touchdowns without an interception. While he had a decent start, by the middle of the season he was starting to struggle again, as when they played ranked teams he threw a ton of interceptions. He came in garbage time towards the back half of the year, and Dante Moore didn't exactly establish himself as the starter. Still though, he won a couple of games, started more games than anybody else we've talked about so far, and definitely had his moments. Because of that, we're going to give him a B. He has since transferred back to Oregon, where he'll be the backup to Dillon Gabriel, and that transfer is also sort of questionable, but in my opinion, Dante Moore is a guy with unlimited potential, and I'm really excited to see what he can do in the future. His time at UCLA will probably be forgotten, and for now, we're going to give him a B. Maybe that's too favorable. At number 2, we have Nico Iamaleava. After completely dominating at Warren High School in Downey, California, Nico was a big deal. He decided to take his near $10 million NIL deal and go over to Tennessee, where last year he'd be the backup to Joe Milton. While at times Milton was inconsistent, it was always best for Nico to probably be on the bench and slowly get acclimated. Eventually he would start their game against Iowa, as in that matchup with the Hawkeyes, he threw for 151 yards and a touchdown and then ran for 3 more on the ground. As you guys know, Iowa has a pretty good defense, so this was extremely impressive for the young player. In total, Nico finished with 314 yards and 5 total touchdowns. Honestly, I'm going to give him a grade of an A-, and now the hype for him has started. Now all the NIL controversy has seemingly been put to bed, so Nico should be good to go for this fall, and I think he's going to dominate. We'll just have to wait and see how good he'll actually be, but Nico had a very promising freshman year. Finally, we get to the number 1 player in the class of 2023, and that was Arch Manning. Well, I'm going to have a video on him coming out in the next few weeks. Some of you guys know I'm not the biggest Arch Manning guy in the world. I think he's fine, but I would have taken Nico, Dante, Jackson, Malachi, and Avery Johnson over him if I was a college recruiter. That's just me though. Manning came in with a ridiculous amount of hype last year and ended up being third fiddle to both Malik Murphy and Quinn Ewers. All the hype in the world for him ended up amounting to him completing 2 of 5 passes for 30 yards. Honestly, that is not a big sample size for me to give a grade, but let's just say compared to that and all the hype he had and what everyone was saying in the offseason, I'm just going to give him an F. Maybe that's my controversial or annoying take of the video, but compared to everything we heard and was thrown in our face by the college football media all offseason, for him to complete 2 passes as a freshman, honestly in my opinion is worthy of an F. Who knows if it's Arch's fault or not, but honestly we're really just going to have to wait and see what happens with his career. I'm not totally sold he even stays at Texas for the entirety of his career, and we'll see. Is he the most overrated player of all time, or will he live up to the hype? We'll just have to wait and find out. So yeah, in today's video we went through the 2023 freshman quarterback class and gave them a grade for their performances in year 1. We talked about 14 total players, and let me know what you guys think. How do you think last year's freshman class did? Who is your favorite player from this class? And should I do a video like this again? If so, be sure to let me know down below. Leave a like if you support today's video, subscribe if you're new, and check out all my other videos on the end screen. I hope to see you guys again soon, but until next time, peace.